For kings, there is nothing more scandalous than being caught cheating, and if the mistress is hiding in your castle, then it's even worse. What would you do if you found out that your husband had been unfaithful? Would you stay with him or leave him? Well, if you were a 16th century queen, your options would be limited because divorce was not an option. If you left your spouse, you would be considered a heretic and go against God. But these days, finding out about infidelity is just the beginning of the drama. In this video, we will show you a royal scandal where the king kept a woman hidden in his private quarters for years. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will meet the king who hid a woman in his private chambers for 18 years. Anne Boleyn was one of the most influential women in the 16th century England. She was a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. Before she became the second wife of King Henry VIII, she quickly rose in the ranks, becoming one of the most powerful women in the kingdom. She may not have been born a princess, but she ended up living like one. The two shared a love for art, music, and literature. They also both enjoyed hunting, hawking, and riding horses. However, Anne wanted something more. She desired to become queen, though it wouldn't be easy. Her competition was the Spanish Princess Catherine of Aragon, who was married to the king for over 20 years. Unfortunately, the couple couldn't produce a male heir. By 1532, Henry decided to move on and began having an affair with Anne. 2 years later, he married her after officially breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church. He did so by declaring himself the supreme head of the Church of England, a decision which led to the English Reformation. This made Anne the first woman to be wed to a king in England without being a princess, or a queen at birth. But even after all those years, Henry still didn't get the son he so desperately wanted. Soon, he began looking for a new bride, and set his eyes on Anne's younger sister Mary. It seemed like Anne had it all, but she never got the respect she craved. Even when she gave birth to a girl, Elizabeth Henry still wasn't satisfied. He divorced her soon after and sent her to the Tower of London. On May 1536, Anne was executed for treason. She was only 35 years old. Henry's next wife, Jane Seymour, finally gave him the son he wanted. However, she died shortly after giving birth. He went on to marry 4 more women: Catherine Howard, Anne of Cleves, Catherine Parr, and finally, Mary Tudor, who became the first queen regnant of England. Henry passed away on January 1547. After ruling for 37 years, he was succeeded by his son, Edward VI. Edward's mother, Jane Seymour, was finally the kind of queen that Henry wanted. But what kind of a woman was she? Jane was just 20 when she entered the royal court of Henry VIII, having been selected by Anne Boleyn herself. The young woman worked as a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. Later, she became one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting during her time as queen. After Anne's execution, Jane found favor with Henry and became one of his On July 1536, she gave birth to a son, the future King Edward VI. A month later, she was married to Henry in a secret ceremony. But the joy was short-lived. On October, Jane died at the age of 24, probably due to complications from childbirth. Now that Jane had died, Henry's attention went back to his ex-wife Anne of Cleves. They had been married for only 6 months, but she had done nothing wrong. The problem was that Henry had seen her in a French painting and thought she looked a lot like Jane. So he wanted her back. Anne, however, was happily married to Thomas Seymour, Jane's brother, and she had no intention of ending her marriage. While visiting the now widowed lady, Queen Anne discovered a plot to kidnap her and take her to France. Apparently, Thomas Seymour was behind the plan and wanted to marry Anne. When Henry heard about this, he became furious. Not only did Anne find herself in danger, but her close relationship with Jane's family, which had now turned against him, offended the king. In order to protect Anne, Henry had Thomas Seymour put to death. He then set his sights on one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, Catherine Howard. The young woman was only 19 when she met the 49-year-old king. It wasn't long before they were sharing romantic moments together. However, Catherine was already married to Thomas Culpeper, but that didn't matter to the infatuated monarch. He was determined to make her his wife. In 1540, he annulled her marriage to Thomas on the grounds that the two were third cousins. 3 days later, he married Catherine. But the young woman soon became bored with life at court, and began having an affair with one of the king's courtiers, Thomas Bridges. When Henry found out, he was furious and sentenced Bridges to death. However, he was much more forgiving with Catherine. He knew that she hadn't meant to hurt him, so he let her off with a warning. But Catherine continued to cheat on him, and when he found out, he had her put to death. His last wife, Catherine Parr, would become a key figure in the life of one of his daughters, Queen Elizabeth. When Henry died, she married Thomas Seymour, the brother of Jane Seymour and Catherine Howard. During this time, she acted as a stepmother to the young princess, who would one day become famous for her New World voice. After the death of Edward VI, Mary I came to power. She had been married to Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, for nearly 20 years, but the couple had no children. Now that she was queen, she wanted to annul their marriage so she could marry someone who could produce an heir. But she couldn't do this alone. She needed the permission of the king, her uncle, Henry VIII, who had passed away 6 years earlier. Here's where things get really complicated. You see, Mary's uncle had kept a woman hidden in his private chambers for almost 20 years, and no one knew who she was or how he met her. In fact, people had no idea that the woman even existed. Only after his death did his servants reveal his little secret. But why did Henry keep this woman hidden? Was she his illegitimate daughter or his mistress? There were rumors that Henry had fathered a child with a woman named Elizabeth Blanc. There was even a story claiming that he had gotten her pregnant on purpose, so he could use the child as a bargaining chip with the King of France. According to legend, the child, a boy, was named Henry Fitzroy and was raised in the royal court until he was 14. At that point, he was whisked away to live in his father's private quarters. Apparently, Henry was very fond of the young man and wanted to keep him away from the court. Because of the constant intrigue, Henry's son had no idea that he was a royal bastard. He grew up thinking that he was the legitimate son of the king and believed that his father was a butcher. However, the truth caught up with him in 1536, when his half-sister Mary was born. From that point on, Henry Fitzroy was treated as a legitimate prince and given the title Duke of Richmond and Somerset. He was given charge of some of the richest lands in England, and allowed to attend his half-sister's christening along with other members of the royal family. Despite being treated like a prince, he was never given the title, and there were many reasons for this. First of all, Henry VIII couldn't publicly acknowledge his affair with Elizabeth Blount, because it would cause a scandal. Secondly, admitting that he had a son outside of his marriage would undermine the legitimacy of his heirs. Finally, acknowledging Fitzroy would threaten Mary's claim to the throne. Therefore, the king had to keep his existence a secret. He arranged for his illegitimate son to be taken care of by 2 servants who had sworn to secrecy. As the boy grew older, Henry brought him to live in his private chambers, far away from the prying eyes of the royal court. It was a perfect arrangement. Henry was able to spend time with his son without anyone knowing, and the Duke of Richmond and Somerset was able to grow up in a loving environment. However, in 1551, everything changed. See, Henry was approaching his mortal end and wanted to make sure that his son would be taken care of. He summoned the royal council and confessed to them that he had a son. Then he ordered that the Duke of Richmond and Somerset should be given a noble education and be allowed to marry. But he didn't want the boy to know his true identity. When Henry passed away 6 years later, Elizabeth Blount's son was only 26. No one knows exactly what happened to him. Some say he lived a happy life, while others claim he died believing he was the legitimate son of the king. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more historical content.